Welcome everyone to another week of Actors Theatre Unscripted. I am so honored to be in this room with such a distinguished panel. I am Erica Denise, and I'm the Director of Learning and Creative Engagement for Actors Theatre of Louisville. Today's panel, we're going to be talking about why we riot, why we write, art and protest in the 21st century. And I just want our panelists to go around this virtual room and introduce themselves, and we'll jump right into the conversation. So Robert, do you want to start first?
Sure, thank you, Erica Denise. I'm Robert Barry Fleming, and I'm the Executive Artistic Director at Actors Theatre of Louisville. I'm so grateful to our panelists to join us today. Thank you.
Sadiqa?
Hi, I'm Sadiqa Reynolds, President and CEO of the Louisville Urban League, a fan of Actors Theatre and all things Robert and Erica Denise. So I'm very happy to be here. And this whole panel, actually. I like all these people.
Amen. Speak.
Corrie Schull.
Hey, my name is Corrie Schull, and I'm thrilled to be on with such a distinguished panel. I'm proud to sit on the board of Actors Theatre and look forward to this conversation with such brilliant people.
And Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Drake. I'm a writer and a blogger, and now my friends are texting me and saying playwright.
Go on, girl.
Yeah.
With the Actors Theatre for having my first show, Fix It Black Girl, that will be next week with a virtual lineup for the Actors Theatre.
Yes. Thank you all so very much for being on this panel. I know we're all exhausted, or I can speak for myself. I'm exhausted with the events that are going on in my city and across the world. And so I just want to jump right on in with the first question. Why in the world are we protesting, and why are they turning into riots?
Well,
none of y'all shy, so come on, jump right in.
I'm gonna jump right in. People are in pain and people are angry, and justifiably so. And the question for me is, the questions about the appropriateness of the nature of those, I think those all have different contexts. I certainly, as a 56-year-old queer Black person, have a really specific purview and paradigm that I'm working from in understanding what is useful and what is maybe not useful, and what is complicated about the nature of protest and rioting. I find the question about the appropriateness, like there's a right way to revolutionize. I don't know that there's a handbook for that, because what it's addressing is, as Trevor Noah spoke to, a social contract that has been broken, and people wanting to have their humanity honored and their humanity seen, and having a persistent, ubiquitous compromise of that. The appropriate human response to that is rage, to that kind of trauma is anger. The question for me is really, how do we move forward when there doesn't seem to be a container for that injustice, and doesn't seem to be a container to move forward in lockstep collectively? So I think we have a lot to talk about, a lot to work through, and it's very layered and very complex.
I would agree. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Drake.
I would agree. Thank you, Reverend Schull. I would agree with Robert for sure. And I do just want to, just at the outset of this, certainly say for Louisville, we are protesting for Breonna Taylor. And many people know the circumstances of Breonna Taylor's situation, but she was a Black woman, 26 years old. Her birthday would have been this Friday. She would have been 27. That was killed in her home by the LMPD. Those are facts. And which is why I wear this shirt, No More No Knocks. They entered her home on a no-knock warrant, and shot and killed her. And that's what happened. And so I think America's at the point, certainly Louisville, that enough is just enough. If you cannot be in your home sleeping, then where can you be? We've seen time and time again with the 911 calls on Black people for doing mundane, everyday things, jogging, walking down the street, whatever the case may be. And here comes someone calling 911, looking at birds in the park. And then it's, I'm gonna call 911, you're threatening me. There aren't many places that Black people know that they can be safe, and at home should be one of them. And so I know for myself and many of us that I've all seen out all of us I've seen out in Louisville, speaking, singing, protesting, shouting. We are here because it is time for justice, and justice for Breonna, and justice for so many Black people that are hashtags in this city and certainly in this country and the world. So I believe that is certainly why we are protesting, not rioting, but if you want to call it a riot, then call it what you want. What I'm fighting for is justice. I don't care how you label it. It's going to be what it's going to be for me. So.
Pastor Schull, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I think people are rioting, people are protesting for very important and meaningful reasons, but some of the rioting, some of the anger that is being expressed is because people, many people, for the entirety of their lives have experienced deprivation at the hands of a racist capitalist system that has stripped from them just basic human dignity, basic resources needed to have a livable and a sustainable life. And I think you're seeing that anger begin to boil over. And so I've heard a lot of critiques of people who are rioting, and I'm careful to judge any of those individuals because there is validity. And I don't think that Americans ought to ever forget that America was born out of a riot. The Boston Tea Party, they were not sitting at tables sipping tea. They were destroying property. And so I think that this is a time for us not to be hypocritical about the origins of this nation, but to really embrace the anger and attempt to parlay it into something that is more long lasting and meaningful.
Yeah. So what I would say about that is that most of these protests have been peaceful. For hours and hours and hours, they have been peaceful. And the most peaceful protests was not what this country was ready for. I think when I think about Colin Kaepernick kneeling on that football field during the anthem, and in fact, even conferring with his friend, the veteran, who said to him, don't sit because that might be disrespectful. Here's what soldiers do. We would kneel. And he took that advice and kneeled quietly on that football field, and people were outraged. They were outraged. They said he was disrespectful. They said he was disruptive. And so there is no approved way for Black people to let this country know how we feel, what we need. They just don't really want to hear from us generally. And I know that it is not everyone. I know there are good people that are of all races. I understand that very clearly. But the power base says to us that your life does not matter. Your pain is not important. And we don't want you to interrupt our football game, not even with a knee. So what I have to say about this is that I have seen mostly peaceful protests, and I have seen some property damage. That property damage is not violence. It is property. And part of our challenge is thinking about the economy and what has been built on the backs of Black Americans. I mean, we have to talk about really the structural issues that push people down so much that they have no place for that rage to go but to bubble up. And I said this the other day on social media. I feel like I am watching a volcano. I am in it, I am being burned, I am living. This is the most complicated thing, but we have a right to our rage. And so I don't approve of, don't condone any violence. I don't want to see the property damage, but I understand. And so I don't condemn because people are in pain. My situation is better than others. But you think about our community in COVID-19 and the way some of us are suffering. So you got a pandemic, and now you add to that more police brutality, and you wonder why people are angry. So this is a righteous rage that we have. And what I hope is that we move to policy change from it and we don't stay in this place. But one thing, it is encouraging to see the diversity. It is encouraging to see so many white people, other people standing with us to say enough is enough. We see what's happening. We understand.
Yeah. And speaking of white people and them standing with us and supporting us, I know I've been receiving lots of inbox messages like, how can we help? What can we do? So do we have any suggestions for our white allies?
I always suggest white people talk to white people. During this time, white people know they have resources. So of course, at the outset, we need resources, things of that nature. But outside of that, to me, white people need to talk to white people, because there are still white people in this world that have no idea why Black people and many others are protesting. They have no idea who Breonna Taylor is, or George Floyd, or Ahmaud Arbery, or Trayvon, or Sandra, or Tamir. They know nothing about those names. They didn't understand or claim not to understand why Colin Kaepernick was protesting. Just today I saw the San Francisco 49ers make a tweet about Black Lives Matter, and I thought, wow, the audacity of you to do this when Colin Kaepernick was warning you, when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, when all of this was going on, you didn't stand with him, didn't support him in any way, shape, or form. And it's like some, I won't say all, but many just don't get it. And so I will not be in circles that some white people will be in. And it's your job, I feel. It's one thing to stand with Black people and protest with us, and I'm glad that they are. But I also think it's one thing for both of us to be standing together, and I'm Black and you're white and we get it together. And then what? You need to take the message that you hear and spread it, because that's the way that we impact this world. And this change will not happen with just Black people. And I'm not saying that Black people are not strong enough, but Black people are not in those positions. Right now you have people fighting to pass an ordinance to ban no-knock warrants, right? Well, the people on Metro Council don't all look like me. They're white. Many of them are white. And so I need those white people on Metro Council to understand why Black people are saying ban no-knock warrants. And so it's going to take other white people to influence them. So that's what I want white people to do. Go talk to white people.
And
I want white people.
Corrie, did you
Go ahead, Barry.
Corrie, you're frozen, so let's let Robert take the floor.
I'll jump in. To that point, there's a organization, the Catalyst Project. They have a Anne Braden reading list. Louisvillians have always been on the forefront. King's brother here in Louisville, King himself, Anne Braden. We have had leadership for years helping white people help white people in the anti-racism collective action for transformation and liberation. And the Catalyst Project is exactly that. And the usefulness of that initiative for me comes from James Baldwin saying, his saying, I am not your Negro, that America, for some reason, needed the M word. I'm not that, none of us are that, but they needed to create a construct in the same way the construct of race has been created in order to work something out. And the bottom of that question lives in critical consciousness. So I think getting those critical race trainings and then digging in, and every day, just like an alcoholic goes to the big book to work on his spiritual maintenance or her spiritual maintenance, One must go into Sandy Darity's work. One must go into Toni Morrison's work. One must continue to investigate what Derek Bell has to tell us about the persistent challenges of an inequitable system, and how that is very different from our interpersonal relationships with ourselves and our white allies, because that is a different conversation than a structural, systemic white supremacist system that in its laws, in its structures, in its institutions and organizations throughout the nation's history, and continuing to be peopled in a way that is inequitable and has disparities inherent in that system. So until people fully recognize and understand that, I feel like it is performative anti-racism. And as someone who is in the field of performativity, both simulated on a stage and recognize what that means in life, how stories shape our perception, I'm really curious about people really investigating those operating assumptions that they perform as they work to be of service to justice and liberties and transformation and a liberation process. So I think we just need to keep in working with those people who have wisdom to guide us and help us grow in our understanding of ourselves and the society in which we live.
Thank you, Robert. Pastor Schull, are you, do you want to finish your thought? You were frozen for a minute there.
Okay, I'm in a place, I don't know how my connection is here. But no, what I was going to say is I appreciate the comments about white people understanding. And I think that it's important for them to begin to foster understanding. But I need white people to do the right thing. They may not ever understand the depths of racism and what it means to be Black in America. But what they can do is they can enforce the, for instance, in the public school system, we have a racial equity policy. There is not only a racial equity policy broadly across the district, there is a racial equity policy at every single school, but not all racial equity policies across the district are created equally, and they are not enforced equally. What we need white teachers to do is to lean in to these conversations that are being had and educate all children, regardless of their race, regardless of the communities that they come from. And we need our educational system, white people in our educational system, to ensure that there is parity and equity across the board, not only with our students, but even with the way some of our district officials are treated. You know, it's interesting, the people who have all of the resources to get their jobs done and the people who don't, the people who have to fight to make their camps work. You all may be familiar with the literacy and camps that are predominantly serving Black kids, and they have to fight for their budgets every year, and it just shouldn't be. So we need white people to commit to doing the right thing as it relates to anti-racism.
Absolutely. I think I agree with everything you all have said. Absolutely agree with it all. And I see that Lyndon made a comment, I think, about it's not enough just to be anti-racist. What did he say? Where is it?
It's not enough to be non-racist. To be non-racist is not enough. You must be anti-racist. And you wanted the panel to discuss what that looks like for individuals, companies, and community groups.
Well, I mean, it's really putting your money where your mouth is. It's really in the work that you do. The silence is really killing us. You know, I think it's heart attacks, the silent killer or whatever. The silence is really, really killing us. I mean, over and over, rinse and repeat, all of these videos of people in our communities being harmed. To, you know, Pastor Schull's point, we are fighting tooth and nail to get educational funding. People are offended when you talk about Black children. I mean, they know that they refuse to allow us to learn or to be taught, and people understand the consequences of that. You have all of these things, but then when you try to repair the damage, you want to talk about everybody. Then we want to talk about how this should be impacting everyone. No, there are some things in this country that have happened to us. They have been put upon us, and it is for America to help make it right. And that just has to be said. That's where we are now, and it can be done. Because the thing about it is, I was just telling somebody earlier, where did we find the stimulus money? I mean, I thought we didn't have any money to do anything. And then Chris got an $85 million check, and Harvard got a $50 million check, and they sent those things back because they said they didn't feel it was appropriate. But I didn't know we had that kind of money to give to folks that didn't need it. So this country knows how to fix it. Some of this stuff is just going to take investment. We are really, I mean, we've got to think about education and wraparound services and making school affordable or free for people whose backs have been broken by policy in this country. We really have to think about what is the pathway to affordable housing? How do we ensure that people can buy land, live in a house, buy a house, own a house and die and leave it to somebody so that we begin to acquire wealth? There's so many things that need to be reformed. So, I mean, and so to be white and to be an ally is to speak up, is to use your voice. It is not enough for you to say, I'm not a racist, but what did you do when you saw racist behavior, or when you read racist policy, or maybe you didn't understand, because that could happen, right? People don't always understand some of these intended or unintended consequences. But what was your response? And I tell you, as a person who fundraises, you even have to be careful philanthropically that you don't get money and then you end up being controlled, your voice pushed down. There are many, many donors, and Robert, you running that, Actors Theater, you have people who they just want you to be free. They want you to do what you need to do. Robbie Tinsley's on your board. I love him. He just made my day today, but that's a different story. But then you have folks who say, because I gave this to you, you owe me something. You owe me some level of loyalty that requires you to sacrifice your people, your position, your soul, your power. Well, that is unacceptable. That's not anti anything. That's pro you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, that's the interesting point to kind of have those ties, the way that capitalism is inherently tied to racism, and to offer that and then be accused of being anti-American by wanting to have a rigorous critical discourse about our systems speaks to the kind of scarecrowing intimidation tactics that artists and scientists and politicians and anyone who wants to be of service to their community often encounter. Those intimidation tactics, those attempts to control and distort messaging in order to maintain a status quo. That is why recognition of a system's inequities and a system's entrenchment in a country doesn't have to have the same architects of that system, because that system becomes self-propagating and takes on a life of its own. So I think that's what often makes it so confusing when people are like, but some of my best friends are Black, or I have white allies who are working with me. How could they be against me? They are for me. But the reality of when we've all been indoctrinated into white supremacist systems, that's not me calling anybody a white supremacist. That's me saying there is a system that has reified a way of dealing with its citizens who happen to be Black or brown or immigrant or other in any other way that is compromising to their liberties. And that system has its own life. And any one of us can be an actor of that oppression. That isn't located because you're Black or you're queer, or that means you're down. I have found Black queer people who are not down and not helpful in this conversation, in the same way I found a Republican helpful in another conversation, simply because they are not lacking transparency in what their agenda is. When there's that nuanced layering where it's really complicated, and in some ways, one can show up as an ally, but there may be a blind spot and not able to show up that way. We have to be equipped to navigate the fluidity of the reality of how that system impacts the subjects on which that system is expressing itself. And that is why I think we have these conversations. It is why we write. It is why we create art. It is why we march. It is why we have these conversations. We all are bringing some gift to that conversation, trying to make a solution.
It is why the caged bird sings.
Hey.
Amen. Hi.
All right, guys. How much is Trump's lack of compassion or leadership escalating the violence that we're seeing across the world?
I'm signing off now. I'm signing off.
Gotta go. Sadiqa
Let Reverend Schull or Robert.
On it.
Won't we let
Of my
somebody,
soul,
let
I'm
somebody that
sorry.
prays regularly?
I'm gonna just say this one. I want to say this one quick thing. This is the one quick thing. Trump was elected by this country either through the apathy of non-participation or explicit participation. So for me, he's insignificant because he's only a figurehead. As someone who's been in multiple organizations and as the second, or even in this organization, I know often the thing that I have to say is I do intend to lead. I just want to make it clear that I'm not going to be a figurehead. I'm going to try to be of service with what I have to offer. And so for me, he's something of a figurehead and a reflection of where the psyche of the nation really lives. That's difficult for people to kind of wrap their minds around. They feel implicated, they feel complicit, and they want to get away from that discomfort as quickly as possible. For me, he's like another push notification on my phone in terms of fanning the flames of something that's so deeply entrenched that it's just another factor that keeps reifying this disparity of agency, movement, and a recognition of humanity. So I don't want to make him more important than he actually is in that equation, because the power lies with us to make different choices. If we go vote, there will be a different outcome. If we begin to have more critical consciousness about how we are not at the will of one powerful person, but are understanding how this system actually works, we have a different way of strategically navigating that and creating a more equitable system for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody else is going to touch that one?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I do here lately agree with Robert, and I will always say this and have always said that the power is truly in the people. And I think to see what's happening around this country, I think Trump, and I call him the Colt 45, but whatever. I don't, but are afraid. They are afraid of people saying enough is enough. And speaking to Sadiqa's point, there are many white people out protesting that have just had enough too. And I think that, so now there's this push, okay, governors, get your states in line. Okay, well, that didn't work. Okay, well, the police, do what you have to do. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, now let's send in the military. Because anytime people rise up, the people in positions of power are going to be afraid. And I think Trump is afraid, but not just Trump. I think what Trump stands for, which is white supremacy, I think people will always be afraid to give up that power. And last night, as I thought about it, to have the military on American soil standing in opposition to people, the majority of people that are just shouting for justice. These aren't people that are out there with weapons and all the things. To have them standing against an army, the military, the National Guard, to me reminded me of the Civil War. You have a group of people that are fighting for justice, and you have a group of people that are hell-bent on defending racism. All of this started to spring out of all of these three murders, but this has been happening. What's happening in America was bound to happen. Trump is really just the fruit of what was really the root of what was already taking place in America. I tell people all the time, Trump didn't invent racism. Trump exploited racism for his gain. It was always there. If he was to be elected out of office, it will still be there. A lot of people, you know, I'd say a lot of people want to resist their way back to brunch. And we want to resist our way to freedom and justice. And a lot of people had their like brunch hour interrupted and they're inconvenienced. And so how can I join with you and fix this so that I can be back to doing my life and living my life and doing my thing? And what they don't understand is for Black people and brown people, these problems will still exist whether Trump is in office or not. And so that's what we must deal with. It's what's up under all of that, which for me is essentially, and people get on me all the time about talking about racism, but when you look at so many problems in the world, you can draw a direct line back to racism. And that's what America needs to deal with, because Trump won't always be here. COVID won't always be here. Racism remains.
Yeah, I think that what he does, his existence in that White House, gives people permission to say out loud the things that many were thinking, but would not have said in an attempt to be politically correct. So it doesn't mean that we would not have suffered, and we were not already suffering, but he does allow for and condone and encourage a level of hatred, out and out hatred, that we have not necessarily had to deal with face to face like that all the time. And you know, you realize after he makes a speech and all of a sudden you start having more racial incidents, you go to the store, people seem more hostile. Though it's that permission that he gives that is a challenge, not to mention some of the policy. I mean, the appointment of judges. If you ask me, is Trump bad for racism? Hell to the yes, he is. He has appointed so many judges to the court that we will have to live with for a long, long time. His conversation around immigration, he is bad. He is bad for Black people. He has not been good at anything. And quite frankly, right now, the money that they are spending to patrol our cities, to keep us pressed down, I really do believe that the United States we're in threat mode right now, because we were already in a pandemic. And now you've got the National Guard deployed to your cities. Your military is stretched. These Republicans, these Democrats, these elected officials need to use their power to fix what is broken in America so we can all get on the same side. We need to be, because it is a threat to our safety and security. So I think that the president, having that kind of man with that kind of language, using those words, empowers people who felt like they had to hide it. And I, like you all, I'm sure, I certainly do prefer when people who are racist declare themselves to be, so that I know what I'm dealing with. That being said, he has pulled these racists out of corners where they have been pushed back, and people have said, no, Johnny, you can't go out and say that. And now it's like, no, I can say anything. I can do anything. I can treat you any kind of way. And I'm walking my dog in the park and you're going to tell me that I shouldn't. I'm calling the police on you, Black man, because I know how they feel about you. I know how my president feels about you. And I know all I have to do is say that you are bad and I can have you killed.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you to our viewers that are commenting and sending your questions. We will get to as many of those as possible. Keep those coming. So Lyndon Pryor wants to know, the faith community, Black and white, has always played a role in how race and racism plays out in this country. And for many, that time seems past. How can or how is that community moving the needle now, specifically in Louisville?
Is Pastor Schull on here? He's not.
Right, that would have been the perfect person.
That could be for him.
Yeah, and I'm sure Lyndon intended it for him. Let's say, can you save it, Erica, until maybe he comes back? We certainly probably have an answer, but we try to, let's let Pastor Schull drive to wherever he's got to drive to get back on this call.
Yeah, okay.
I would like, I'm wondering if I could offer one observation as I'm downtown here and I've been seeing a lot of this action being here in the center of it. And, I was noting going back to our initial question about why people protest, why they riot, I don't think there's a monolithic reason based on what I'm observing, because I watched a group of people who would identify as Black and people who would identify as white collectively, peacefully protest Breonna Taylor in the way that they were engaging out there. I saw tear gas shot at them, rubber bullets shot at them. While they were doing that, I saw them pushed all the way up 2nd Street. And then immediately I saw 3 trucks come into the grass as soon as the police had left, and they started doing donuts, destroying the grass. And I said, these are not the same people who are going up the street protesting Breonna Taylor. These are people who are angry and disenfranchised for an entirely different reason, but also needing to destroy and destruct and protest and feeling left out, and taking the opportunity to join with Black folks and allies to say, I too feel disenfranchised. And I think some of that is the outrage of, I feel like I'm being lumped with this group of people that I feel better than. And so I want to destroy too. So we have multiple reasons. There's like, it's almost been like a 10-ring circus downtown for days on end, with the helicopters shaping those narratives, with the media watching what's actually happening, seeing the complexity of who is acting in what manner. And so it begs the question of who is doing what and why, and understanding that these are things that are intersecting. It's not all one monolithic reason, and it's not all Black people that are engaged in this activity, and it's not all Louisvillians that are engaged in activity. Because people are asking me on the street, hey, can you tell me where the statue is? Can you tell me? And I'm like, why don't you know if you're from Louisville? So clearly there's a mix of who's coming and who's taking the opportunity to participate, and in what way and for what reason.
And you know that because it's happening across the country, right? This is something that has been boiling up across the country. That's why you know Louisville is not unique. We want our city to be unique. We want to say we're compassionate. We want to say we're different. And in some ways we are. And that's why we probably have the ability to turn this around in ways that other cities may not be able to get in touch with. But what we are going to have to do is be honest with one another. And we are going to make white people feel uncomfortable. Good white people who had good intentions and thought they were doing the right thing, they're going to have to be uncomfortable with the truth for a little while so we can work on how to fix this. And that is hard. That is a hard thing. I also want to say, though, we cannot minimize that there are infiltrators coming in to protest. There are people who hate us, don't believe our lives matter, and I think we're probably going to have more evidence of that coming up. I am concerned about that. I think people need to be clear about when they're protesting, who they are following, who they are aligned with, who their ally is. Everybody standing beside you is not for you. And if you would, and so we really do need to think about that as we're, we're doing this. So, but I am encouraged, like you said, about the different types of people. The number of white people, not just the guy on the news with the hammer and breaking stuff up we've certainly seen some of that among white folks. Are bold. Like they get up in the cops' face, they're saying all kinds of stuff. I'm like, they need to be quiet. They're gonna get us killed. It ain't gonna be them that gets killed. We're gonna get killed. But they're out here and they're with us. But there are still, you have to, I think our lead needs to be followed. If we want a peaceful protest, it needs to be a peaceful protest. When we were at 26th and Broadway and somebody threw a water bottle, I think it was a white female, I don't really remember. The community said, no, that's not what we want to do here. Because the goal was to be able to have, the barbecue man's body be moved without any incident, because it was not in anybody's interest for something to happen there. Yeah. So this is, and can I tell you all something? And Hannah was there, to stand at 26th and Broadway, and I'm gonna speak for me, to be the president of the Louisville Urban League, to feel in your soul so responsible for so many things in your community, things you can't control. But in my, what I cannot explain to you the level and the depth of my concern and feel like responsibility in some cases, and to be standing out there with people upset. I mean, you're with a beloved community member. His body is across the street. The community on one side, police on one side, some in riot gear, some in regular police uniform. And you know that that body's gonna have to come out, his mother further down the block, and the crowd is growing. And that energy, we had people on both, clearly the police had their weapons, and some of these folks had their, community had their weapons, and everybody's stuff was out. And that energy and feeling, I mean, like, how is this going to end? How is this going to end? Because we have to make sure everybody, we one wrong move and it could be terrible. And I don't believe every protest always has to be peaceful. There's a time for everything. Believe me, this was a time for peace. Right, Hannah? Like, we needed to just get through it, and out of respect for the family too. But to have no answer, like just to be down there and to know that the person you love, right, this community love, who gave free food, even to police, is dead. He's still there. We're in pain, and the people who killed him are over there with him. And we got to stand here and watch, not for an hour, for hours. And somehow, for me, I want to make sure everybody comes out of this alive. Let me tell you why we riot and why we write. Because when that thing is over, the pain, the anguish, your soul cries out. I live downtown like you, Robert, and this is at 26. I am about a 7-minute drive. I can get anywhere. It took me an hour and a half to get home because I kept pulling over to get myself together. We are traumatized. We are traumatized. And honestly, the officers, and Hannah will say, they told us the time, they worked it out, we were able to agree on how to do things, and they left instead of us, so they were, that officer who was the lead, he was humane. But how do you find humanity in all of this juxtaposition of who we are and how we work? And, this was overwhelming.
Yes.
So that's why we write. That's why we riot. Same reasons. Trying to deal with this pain of all that we have seen and endured and had to swallow. Because if you think we are really angry Black women, you don't even understand the things we don't bring up.
Right. And I also think, just piggybacking off Sadiqa, and she's right. Of course, I was at 26 in Broadway and felt compelled to be, because I love Black people. I love my people. And what I didn't want was this to go all the way left and it would be another story. And I'm really big on, since the topic is why we write and why we riot, is the narrative. The person who controls the narrative controls the story, and the narrative impact policy. And I talk to people about this all the time, and that's why some people are great at seizing and telling a story the way it's told, and why is the story being told that particular way. And so I use the example of Black women who were addicted to crack being called crack whores, when they had babies was crack babies, and white women that were on drugs or on meth need help and they need intervention. And I said, when you repeat these things, you are helping use language that they are going to use to now write the policy, because they crafted the story, the narrative, and then they created the policy and sent Black people to prison and sent white people to get treatment. And so during this whole thing with Breonna Taylor, because we saw the story was being crafted. Well, what's going on with this story, and what's really, and as more came out, I felt as a writer and as an artist, I need to seize this story. And I need to be, when they put out a press release, and I'm going to say something. So I'm just the regular old person, the street journalist, and I'm going to put out a story. Because they will always, now we see the story, well, we must dig into George Floyd's criminal background, and we must now tell that narrative. You know, the narrative is an officer put his knee on his neck and killed him. That's the story. And that's what we always must do. Even with David McAtee here, let's seize the story. You know, whatever they want to make it or whatever it is, we cannot deny that this man fed the LMPD. We cannot deny that this man fed his community. You do not go from catering for the LMPD, feeding the LMPD, feeding the homeless, to now I want to be in a gunfight with LMPD. So let's seize the narrative. You know, let's tell all of the story, because we know how stories are told. And I feel that is our job as artists. That's why we tell the stories, because for so long our stories have been muted, and we have allowed, and other people have just told the story for us. And I think when we have channels like the Actors Theater, like Kentucky Arts, things of that nature, it's our job. If you are in a position of power, and that's why I thank you, Robert, if you are in a position of power and influence, tell the stories of Black people and allow Black artists to have voice. You know, because our stories are simply the stories of this nation, and that's what we need to be. I don't need anybody else to tell my story. Absolutely. You know, but when you murder someone like Breonna Taylor, cut down her life, I'm not going to let it end right there. Now it's my job to dig up the story and tell the truth of who Breonna was as an artist. That's what we are called to do. I think it was Nina Simone. An artist's duty is to speak about the times. And if you are an artist in this time, now is your time to create. Now is your time to write. This is history. This is the next play. This is the next musical. This is the next opera. This is the next all of the things. This is it right here, unfolding right in front of you. And so what are you going to do with that? Allow somebody else to tell the story? Or do we as Black people take back our narrative and tell our own story?
Absolutely.
Can I say this in that telling of that story, Hannah? And I just appreciate everything you've said. I do.
Amen.
The telling of that, I'm so tough. Let me just take a moment to, because that's part of the challenge of this, is the story that gets told and how we are characterized. Let me tell you, it is somehow you feel like if the person who you are saying is a victim is not perfect, then they don't count. So when we find out that Breonna Taylor, oh my God, you mean she was treating COVID-19? Thomas, I'm sorry, I said Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, yeah. When you find out Breonna was treating COVID-19 patients, when you find out this, when you find out now, maybe you want to raise your voice. But what I've always said is, sometimes the police kill innocent people.
Come on.
Sometimes they kill guilty people.
Come on.
But those people should not be executed in the street. In America, you have the right to a jury trial.
Amen. Yes.
So what we have seen in this country and in this city, we have seen police show us that they know how to police. They are capable of arresting guilty people. The best and worst example I have in Louisville, Kentucky, is the Kroger shooter. He killed 2 Black people. He wanted to kill more. He said it, he made it clear, and they handcuffed him and walked him to jail.
Gun in hand.
So now, you know, I think, so now we have situations where people say, well, there was a weapon fired, there was a weapon. And you think white people don't do that? No, the problem is in somehow psychologically, we have been so dehumanized in this country that really in that moment, you understand there will be no consequences for my life.
Mm.
There's the reality that Black and brown bodies have served as vehicles for white anxiety, for white fear, for white joy and desire, that our bodies have been there for the service of processing their subjective experiences. And that's been from the founding of this country. That is very difficult to unroot from the psychology of the human animal, when that is kind of the foundation of one's relationship with you, that I see your body as the source of my punching bag. You're the dog that I get to kick. And when that gets deassociated, when one goes into dissociation, when one goes into compartmentalization, when one moves into denials, spaces of denial of that casual violence, the kind of like, you know, we hear, as Trevor Noah again said, you know, we hear that these officers are scared for their lives and they're reacting based on that. But when you see the casual, the kind of sociopathic distance, or the ability to just simply for 9 minutes in a sustained manner, murder someone on camera, that is impactful for me to recognize, oh, again, my body for you as a Black and brown person is there for you to work through your sense of inadequacy, masculinity, sense of power and agency, to have power over life and death, to express my fear, to express my joy, you know, but you are there to be extracted from, objectified, and used as a thing. That is the thing that makes people really feel like, yeah, I think a social contract has been broken, because I was told this was the land of the free. I was told that I had the rights of all men and all men were created equal. And even in that term, that does not include non-binary people. That does not include women. That does not include people who you are dividing, saying, oh, now you're going to be white, which is a very fluid concept in America. You know, there was a time Italians weren't white. There was a time Jews weren't white. You know, that's fluid. So if you got the deal where you get to be something that gives you some privilege, and you trade that privilege for good, if you want to call it good, or for constructive dismantling of a system that is inherently unjust, that is a useful place to put that energy. We've got to be aware of how we're using our privilege. I am privileged. I have a certain level of privilege, and I have to be attentive, as Hannah said, to how I utilize that privilege for the good of the community. And it has to be for something bigger than ourselves, because we are inherently self-interested creatures, and we have to have something bigger than ourselves to work for, to fight for, to align ourselves with, to be at our best.
Thank you, guys. We try to keep these panels at an hour. It looks like we're going to go over a little bit because I want to get into at least 2 more questions. So TJ Delahanty, our friend over at Metro United Way, is asking, what's next? What are the policies we need to advocate for to change systemic issues? And then I'll also follow that up with, what are the people asking for? What are the demands?
So definitely, you know, that the people want to see the officers terminated and charged. And even lately, you've heard people talk about consequences for the judge who signed the warrant, at least somebody to review that. People want to see recruitment of more Black officers, those officers to have some support in the department. I think there are there are less than 140 officers and, like, you know, talking about 1,100 folks. So it's about a 12% African-American, only 25 women when you think about 1,100 officers. So we need to increase, think about who's recruiting, what kind of money is being spent on recruitment. FOP, that union, there needs to be apologies. There were no apologies when police officers molested young men in the Explorer Boy Scouts program. The FOP owes us an apology when they stand by bad officers, and they owe the officers you know, an apology, because the good ones are also put at risk when these bad things happen. Other things, the no-knock warrant, the mayor has, no-knock warrants are suspended. That was one of the demands. The mayor has responded to that. They've been temporarily suspended. And Hannah, I think, made the point earlier that the council has indicated that they've got legislation moving forward. There also, though, I think for us, we have got to talk about broader pictures. So the league is always about jobs, justice, education, health, and housing, because it's in all of those areas where we really do need reform. So there's something about job placement, but there's also something about small business support, you know, entrepreneurship. What kind of funding can we gather together now that we know we've got $130 million and lots more money just laying around in America? How do we put that in, put that to work in our community so that people who have been really impacted by broken policy and redlining in our country can really feel completely invested and have access to the same opportunities? Education, you know, our educational system is just so flawed. There's really no equity. The achievement gap is growing. It will grow wider because of COVID-19, because of the technology divide. Our teachers need support in how to support our young people. The classrooms are too large, so we need significant investment. And I'll tell you, remember, this is a city that built Brandeis Elementary in the West End and barely has a West End resident in the school. So all this talk about the 9th Street divide in Louisville is, people will come across 9th if there's something worth coming for, because we see people of privilege come all the time. So even when you build neighborhood schools, you have to fight for your children to be able to go to the neighborhood school. So I think those are the kinds of things. Affordable housing. How do we really think about creating a pathway to ownership for people who are currently in the West End and want to be homeowners? I think it is important for us to acquire wealth and be able to pass it down. That's part of the challenge. I think education for African-American people should be free. You know, if you think about some of the historic injustices in our country, we've got to figure out how to make a way, because if we can close the achievement gap, we can close the access gap. They're just all, you know, there are things that should not be allowed in America, like a food desert, you know, those kinds of things. So, I mean, we have some specific things here about out of school time, about education, about investments, real policy change that could be impacted now. One thing I want to talk about just on the housing side, we are in desperate need of affordable housing. And we also have the vast majority of vacant and abandoned properties are sitting in the West End. We're building this $50-some-odd million project in the West End of Louisville, you know, the sports and learning complex. Why wouldn't we build up the neighborhood for the people who are there and create pathways to ownership so that everybody, you know what I'm saying, feels invested and is truly invested? I mean, poverty is an underlying cause here, and I don't separate poverty and race because it's racism keeping people poor. So there are some things that we can do in this city right now. We could begin that could really move the needle in ways that people don't feel like they have to rise up in this way.
So what would you all say to the naysayers who don't think your organizations are doing enough? And Robert, how do you feel about where Actors Theatre is and what people are saying we are and we aren't doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting criticism, because as somebody who's 56 years old, to have certain people have the arrogance to tell me how I should be responding to something that is impacting me and my people, you know, frankly, it's like, when was the last time you read Derek Bell? When was the last time you understood the complexities of the impact of this? People of varying social, historically marginalized locations, again, as I said, does not necessarily give you license to understand, to speak from the perspective of a Black person. Or even if you are a Black person, you know, we'd have to have a fuller conversation to really understand how much white supremacy is indoctrinated into your understanding of yourself in the world, your understanding of the world itself. So I would be more invested in a more critical dialogue through storytelling, through art. I don't want to give singular statements and not back that up with my programming and not back that up with my educational initiatives or my residencies in the schools. That's not what I'm doing. Some of that takes a little time. I might not be able to respond to that today, but it'll be there tomorrow. You know, we just announced our season. We just announced what our residencies will be within the West End School, what we're going to be doing throughout the community. So I really don't feel that I answer to people's attempt to do a high lynching of our organization or me based on lack of facts and lack of critical consciousness about what this conversation is actually about. I am welcoming being a target for that conversation just so that I can bring the attention once again to we are talking about a systemic, structural, and cultural reality. We live in a place where plantation capitalism was a part of how certain kinds of wealth was accumulated. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. So you can make that about me, you can make that about actors, but that wouldn't be a useful way to really help liberate all of us. Across Kentucky, across Kentuckiana, and the nation and the world. If we want to stay in the status quo and keep reifying these things, keep making it a personal attack to different individuals, if you want to see real change, you're going to have a larger global view and follow people's lead who have been put in positions to lead. You don't have to agree with what Actors is doing or what I'm doing. And generative conflict can be a very healthy and constructive thing. And I welcome that. However, I don't feel at this juncture it's useful to defer to attempts to diminish that are not fact-based. I don't know how that's useful in addressing the inequities. And my goal is to fulfill our mission, to unlock human potential, to build community, to enrich lives. So that's my priority. That's who I answer to. That's who Actors is going to answer to, that mission.
Absolutely. Sadiqa, what about the Urban League? What are people saying you aren't doing enough, or what's going on over there?
I don't know what they're saying. I think we get a lot of love. We get a lot of support. There are always going to be people that you can't satisfy. You can never do enough. I think we get a lot of public support, and I think there are people who don't like that, but very few. I would say 90. I think I've lived through my funeral. If you could imagine that your funeral would be the place where people would love you the most. I think I have had the opportunity in this community to live through my funeral about a dozen times. And so I know how hard we're working. I feel the love, I feel the support, I feel the wind beneath my wings. I do think there's more, there's always more. That is the complication of our existence. And so, you know, you do the best you can with what you have. When I signed up for this job, nobody told me that I would ever stand across the street from a body and try to maintain my composure and help 400 other people with theirs. I mean, there are just some things that have never been considered to be in my job description, but because of who I am, at the core of who I am and what I have experienced in my own life, somehow God has equipped me to be in position to handle these things and to do it effectively. I am 48 years old, and in the last few years, I have gotten very comfortable with who I am and how good I am at what I do. And so I don't even mind the criticism. I rarely entertain it. 10 years ago, you could make me cry. My feelings would get hurt. Now I am so comfortable. It just doesn't even happen. In fact, I have to be real careful because I'm like Michelle Obama. When they go high, low, she goes high. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go low with you because now you really need to see all of who I am. So, you know, I think it is important for us to acknowledge to ourselves that we deserve breaks sometimes as leaders, that we get to cry. You can't get through certain things without that. We have to give ourselves permission to have that pain, permission to be there for one another, to experience this authentically, because for my job especially, and I'm sure you all at Actors, and Hannah, you know, Pastor Schull, we are trying to deconstruct systems that we are being oppressed by. So you have your own trauma that you're dealing with in every day. and then still trying to work, and people are bringing their pain to you, and you all can maybe write about it or talk about, they expect me to fix this, and I'm trying to fix what is broken in my own world. I am trying to fix that somebody just grabbed my whole head at a party because I had braids and just and I'm trying to deal with the complications of my own existence in this space. So I think the league is doing a good job. I know that we are, but certainly we will never be able to please anybody. That's white and Black. I've lost donors. I don't think people really understand the cost of being vocal and trying to raise money to employ people, to give them health insurance, to be able to serve the community. I have had the phone call where someone said, I'm no longer going to support you because of this, this, and this. And I have said back, you know what, I may lose everything, but my soul I am in charge of. So God feeds the birds, surely I will eat, and I'm going to do what I believe to be right in all counts. But I want to say this about whiteness or Jewish people, especially. Like I have seen so much hatred lately. I think, again, back to this Trump thing, I'm sorry, but this was on my mind. I think every community that is not just clearly white has suffered with this president. I think that people, I mean, our Jewish brothers and sisters and other immigrants, people are suffering because there is permission to hate. There is permission to taunt. There is permission. And we have to make it clear to our elected officials, this has to stop. You have to get this guy out of there. This has to stop. This is unacceptable. So thank you.
Thank you, Sadiqa. Welcome back, Pastor Schull. He had some technical difficulties. And there was a question that came in specifically for you. And so I want to get that in before we close. So the faith community, Black and white, has always played a role in how race and racism plays out in this country. And for many, that time seems past. How is that community moving the needle now, specifically in Louisville? And then I'll add to that, if I see one more post on Facebook that says, where's the church? Where's the pastors? I'm going to scream. So can you speak to that and let the world know where you are?
Yeah, I keep seeing that. And I the other day, I began to question whether or not I'd become invisible. Because I'm like, I know I'm in spaces and in all kind of places trying to do the work and trying to contribute to the good work that's being done in this city. Now, my own personal conviction is that when good work is being done, it's not my place to step in and try to take the bullhorn or try to get the attention that derives from that situation. I need to be an ally. I need to stand behind good people who are doing great things in this city. And so often when people begin to say, where is the church? Where are pastors doing this? I can't speak for all pastors. I don't know where all pastors are. I do know that different people have different skill sets. They have different convictions about how they move about in the world. And I choose to believe that people are genuinely doing the best they can with what they have and with where they are. So when the protest started last Thursday, my children were at home with me. Friday night, my children were with me. I couldn't leave and be downtown. I wanted to be there, but I couldn't be there. But there were some other ways that I could leverage influence, that I could leverage resources from the institution that I lead, that I could lend my voice to what was happening on the streets. And so I've talked to dozens of pastors, and many of them are doing much of the same thing. As it relates to some of our white brothers and sisters here in the city, there are some white churches that are doing extraordinary work as it relates to justice. There are white churches that are more consistent in their justice work than are many, many, many Black churches. And those churches should be applauded. Some of those churches are like Highland Baptist Church. There are other, Crescent Hill Baptist Church. They're always a part of the fight. And so we don't need to ignore them because some of our white evangelical brothers and sisters don't lift their voices in times like these. Earlier in this conversation, I said that I don't necessarily, I wish white people, could understand my pain and other Black people's pain as to what it means to be Black in this country. But a part of that is hard work, a part of that is head work, part of that is a longer journey. There are some very tangible ways that white people can leverage their privilege, they can level their influence, and they can use their voice to challenge the systems and the structures that continue to grind Black life under and continue to oppress Black people. And I don't believe that white evangelical churches in this community are willing to do that. I don't believe that they have the moral clarity to do that. And when I say they don't have the moral clarity, what I mean very distinctly is that in 2014, when many of us were fighting, insisting that the LMPD here in Louisville had body cams, and we were being told that there was not funding for it and that could not be accomplished. While Black Lives Matters were in the street, at that point they were having die-ins and that sort of thing in St. Matthew's Mall and in other places, out in front of the mayor's office and other places. One very, 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 very prominent evangelical pastor, I would say the most prominent white evangelical pastor here in Louisville, wrote an op-ed in response to the Black Lives Matters movement saying that Blue Lives Matter. And that, to me, was a slap in the face to not only every family that has had to grapple with the grief and the terror of police-sponsored brutality, but it was a slap in the face to every Black person who sits in that huge white evangelical church, pays their money through tithes and offerings to that white evangelical church, supports the ministries of that white evangelical church, but that white evangelical church is so callous that it can't even bring itself to say Black Lives Matters. It can't bring itself to say the name of Breonna Taylor or George Floyd. And I checked this, I think last night, because I just wanted to know where they were in this conversation. The city is literally in chaos, and most of our white evangelical brothers and sisters, who, by the way, are the theological bastion of support for Donald Trump and his administration, they won't say anything because they do not have the moral clarity to do so. And that's heartbreaking to me. And my personal prayer is that God would begin to change the hearts of these individuals. Some of them I know well. We participated in various things together, and I am disheartened that they will not do more to leverage their privilege to ensure that life is honored in all of its forms, and is honored by all institutions, including the LMPD, the city government, the state government, so on and so forth. We have a lot of work to do as it relates to convincing our white evangelical brothers and sisters that there are more moral issues besides abortion. And really opening their eyes to the suffering that's all around them, which they quite honestly just refuse to see.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Schull. I want to go ahead and bring this to a close, but I do want to ask before we do get out of here, what are we doing for our mental health and our self-care? And I'm sorry, Robert, I know I was supposed to be working today, but I left and went and got my hair done, my nails, pedicure, eyebrows, and everything. So I just needed to just, take care of me. I've been so exhausted. But are you guys taking care of yourselves? How are you protecting your mental space?
I don't honestly, for me at this moment, I've not had time to sit and think about that because so much is happening. But I will say I do appreciate all of the calls and text and expressions of love and concern that have been shown to me. And I'm learning to allow people to help me. You know, yesterday I was cooking dinner. Someone had offered to bring me dinner, and I thought, no, I'll make dinner. And while I was cooking, I thought that was the dumbest thing I ever decided to do. And I made steak. And my daughter said, what did you eat with the steak? And I said, steak on a piece of bread, because I was tired. But when people do offer to help, you don't want to seem like I'm doing something to get something. I know all of us, we would be out in the streets and doing what we do with our platforms, period. It's just who we are and what we do. And so I didn't want to take anything for doing anything. That's just what I would be doing. But I'm learning to allow, for some people, as Reverend Schull and others have spoke out, that's their way. They don't know any other way. And so if I can bring you dinner, I'm going to do what I can do in my lane. And I sure would have appreciated last night instead of eating a piece of steak on a piece of bread. But it is what it is because I didn't have time. But I do want to say that I've appreciated Louisville and the outpouring of support for those of us that they know are really fighting and trying to reach some level of justice in the city.
I have, I've at 2 nights, people have bought dinner because my kids, you know, I've got I got a 14 and a 13-year-old, and I have really allowed people to help because it is a lot. And so I'm not going to say that it's not, it is. And I'm having trouble, honestly, concentrating to cook a meal, to be quite frank with you. So this is the longest I have been sitting down since this started. And to put things into context, you know, someday the story will really be told, but trying to build this complex and then having COVID-19 hit and being desperate for millions of dollars, not just kind of needing it, but, you know, being in a position to not just help people get jobs, but to create jobs, and then feeling like you're going to have to lay everybody off. I have been on my knees in this pandemic in ways, I mean, you know, you just stay humble, that's all. And then you're out doing whatever. But so doing that, plus the work of the league, because we never closed. We did not close our doors. We canceled one class through everything from the start of the pandemic, and we'll continue on. And then to have this happen, all of this going on, this is the longest I've honestly sat still since this eruption of this volcano around these deaths. And I have had just the roughest time really concentrating on anything other than the tragedies that are surrounding us. So I don't have any idea where I was supposed to be when I found out that the barbecue man was still there. But I just was like, that's what I have to do. And that's how the days have gone, that you try to go where you need to go because you know you have the ability to influence people. And I want to say to Louisville, it is a blessing that all we got was glass broken, because this could have, and it's not over.
Right.
But I'm hearing helicopters now, but this thing, you have people in this city who are trying hard in every way to not only maintain our own mental health, but to help some of our brothers and sisters through their pain. And I am managing it. I take long baths. I did like 3-4 hours from when I'm all on social media late at night, 12 to like 4 in the morning. It works for me, but I can't concentrate to get a whole meal cooked, to Hannah's point, and I haven't. So I don't really know who's raising these kids. I'm glad school is out and they don't have NTI. Because I'm just like, you do the best you can. But the reward, to Hannah's point, the way this community steps up, white people, Black people to say, hey, I see you and my role is not to be there, but let me help. Can I do this? Can I do that? You know, you just know you're in your purpose.
Yeah.
And I love y'all. I want to say this. Can I just say something? This beautiful panel, the level of intelligence, y'all have no idea how good I feel just to be around you anytime I see you. And then to display this so that other people can see this magic. I am in love.
And
What my soul needed.
Thank you, Sadiqa. Thank you. Robert, you taking care of yourself? We have to tell him to go to sleep sometime. So.
You know, yeah, we're doing the 24/7 thing here, and you know, you looking at probably one of the a brother who's done good 30 years of therapy and just spiritual work and keeps in them books and keeps looking for to stay a lifetime learner. So for me, it's just continuing to have these conversations, make space, try to be of service, try to love, to try to counter the hate. And to celebrate. I mean, I'm just going to echo what Sadiqa said. This is this panel. I'm so deeply honored to be amongst this group of people, and to be able to be of service in a place that I believe is so special and such a contributor to not only Louisville, Kentucky, the nation, but the world. I mean, any place that has Thomas Merton and Muhammad Ali and Ann Braden, and then these folk coming from it, that is a place that I want to be. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. So I just count my blessings. I stay in gratitude, and I stay in my rage. I stay in my joy. I stay in my grieving, and I keep processing. And I am grateful for y'all telling me to go to bed, just like I tell y'all to go, like, get out the streets. We each been out there at certain hours, and we tell each other it's time to go home. Yeah. It's time to go home, get something to eat. You know, I believe this is a team effort, and I am so grateful to have each and every one of you. I have too many blessings to be angry for more than 10 minutes. You know, it's like I have too many blessings to be in grief for longer than a rant. So I just stay grateful, and I am reminded that I am so deeply, deeply blessed, and in no shortage by the people around this particular panel and in my organization who are so beautiful, so committed to the well-being of Actors Theater and this community. I am deeply honored by that and humbled by that.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. I was down there Friday night, and I called Robert.
Yes, you were.
I called Robert at midnight. They down there breaking windows by your house. You okay? And he's like, go home, Erica, go home. So, and I appreciate that open line of communication that you give us. And I thank you for being a fearless leader. I'll follow you. I'm so glad that I'm a part of Actors Theater, Robert. I'm so grateful.
Likewise.
All of y'all too, Sadiqa, Corrie, Hannah, I love every last one of you all. And I'm so humbled to be moderating this panel. I'm so humbled. So Pastor Schull, do you want to tell us if you're taking care of yourself and what you're doing?
Well, let me say thank you all for letting me hang out with such brilliant people. You know, I'm all of y'all's student. I am just always been a fan of each of you, and glad to know you. As for what I'm doing for self-care, I don't know if I want to say all of it on Al Gore's internet. I don't know if I want to put my secret out there.
Won't he do it?
Yeah. Huh?
Is that what you've been?
I said I'm not putting it out there on the internet.
Let him finish.
I'm just, yeah. I've just been making sure I'm taken care of, though.
Amen.
Sadiqa, word on the street is you running for mayor. How true is that?
Oh, that's completely false. I'm not going to run for mayor. I love the Urban League. And listen, I raised $52 million. This project's going to be done. Humana just saved us They came in with the last $6.5 million on this project.
Right.
Listen, this thing right here, I'm getting ready to watch. I would not go through all this labor to leave now. We have just given birth. Let's watch this baby. Let's watch this baby grow.
I love it. You're a rock star. All right, let's close this out. Let's go around in 1 or 2 sentences quickly, and then we'll get off of here. Thank you to everybody that has tuned in. We appreciate your comments and your questions. Tune in next week with Hannah Drake, who has curated several pieces of poetry and spoken word and song for us. Tune in on the Actors Theater channel for Fix It Black Girl, Friday at 7 o'clock. And before we leave, what do you know for sure? Corrie, Schull.
What do I know for sure? I know that God is real and things will get better.
Robert. Mute it, Robert.
That we are love and love will triumph.
Amen. Hannah.
What I know for sure is that everybody has the capability to do something. So it doesn't matter what you do, just do something.
Amen. Sadiqa.
I know for sure that I have found the thing that I am willing to die doing.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so very much for being on this panel on Actors Theater's platform. We are so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica, Denise.
Bye.
Great job.